What could 100,000 hours of water treatment sales experience do for your next sales meeting? Lauren Rial turns a career of top-ranked performance into practical training and talks that help your team win more business and keep the accounts they already have. Blending game theory concepts with Harvard and Princeton-backed research, Lauren doesn't bring hype, he brings sales conversations that water treaters understand and can actually use. He works with water treatment companies to train sales teams, lead interactive workshops, and speak at business and sales meetings focused on growing new revenue and strengthening customer relationships. If you want your next meeting to spark real ideas and follow-up, visit scalinguph2o.com/Rial Water and see how Lauren Rial can help your sales team sell more on purpose. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/Rial Water. Real sales training, real sales motivation, and real sales experience. That's Rial Water. Welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast, the podcast where we scale up on knowledge so we don't scale up our systems. I'm Trace Blackmore, the host of the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And Nation, I have to say, one of the most confusing things about our job is learning about the bugs that grow in our system. All of the microbiological activity that takes place in our systems does not care about all the things we want to do to eliminate it. And of course, we need to eliminate it because it causes havoc throughout our systems, whether it's algae, fungus, yeast, molds, bacteria. All of those things play havoc in our systems by, one, they reduce the capacity of us to be able to transfer heat or actually transfer water in the system because they're taking up volume. They're not allowing for our corrosion products to get to the actual metal. They're actually creating corrosion the way they reside on the metal. And of course, they form biofilms that slough off and create all sorts of problems, including the ones that I just mentioned. Now, to define a biofilm is simply a community of microorganisms, like what I mentioned before, that stick to a surface and then embed themselves in a slimy, self-produced matrix. All right, well, that's how the dictionary defines biofilm. Now, as water treaters, we know all of the issues that come with biofilms. Biofilms are often more insulating than mineral scales. So calcium carbonate and biofilm, if you actually look at how insulating the two are, biofilm will actually cause more of an insulation issue with heat transfer. Did you know that? I know we've had that on the podcast before. Work from the Center for Biofilm Engineering at Montana State suggests that they can be roughly an order of magnitude more insulating than these other scale deposits, which means every thin layer can significantly hurt your heat transfer. Now, if you want to revisit that topic and hear straight from the person that runs the Center for Biofilm Engineering at Montana State, tune in to episode 253, where we talked with Dr. Paul Sturman from Montana State. That was a great interview, and today's going to be a great interview because you're going to hear from a longtime colleague of mine. We've done field trials together. We've done all sorts of things because he lives in the Atlanta area. He would invent new things and he would have us try it out. We've delivered papers together at the Association of Water Technologies. Well, I don't know why I keep talking about it. Why don't we just bring on the interview? Here it is. My lab partner today is Dr. Jeff Kramer, Technical Director of Radical Polymers, a division of MFG Chemical. Jeff, welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast.
Well, thanks, Trace. It's a pleasure to be here, and looking forward to our chat.
I am as well. You and I have been friends for years. I'm trying to think. I don't know if you know this, but you helped me write my first white paper where you had me try out a biocide that you were thinking, hey, will this work in cooling? And that was the very first white paper that you and I kind of co wrote together. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I was reflecting on that myself. Yeah, that was I think back in like 2006. We were introducing a new biocide, and we ran a field trial together, and we learned a lot about our product doing that. So yeah, that was quite a collaboration we had.
I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but we learned that we had to have the right materials of construction because we obliterated a pump head when we were trying that out, if you remember that.
Yeah, that was kind of surprising to us too. Yeah, that product did not like some plastics, but luckily we were able to find some more compatible materials for those pumps. But that was a surprise to us at the time, and I mean, it was nice learning that with a friendly colleague, in the industry at the time, and it didn't, sabotage the launch of the product, let's say.
Well, the funny thing about that was right when we put that product in, a disgruntled employee got let go from that particular building. And the staff there thought he came back and took a hammer to the pump. And of course, we thought that too. But then we learned no, it was actually the product that we were feeding there. And I think as a result, I don't remember the percentage, but it was a lot higher than what you guys settled on. I think you went with a 5% solution instead of whatever we were using.
We had a pretty hot product. Yeah, it was up around 50% at the time that you and I were using there. But the 5% product is like the dominant product now in this space, in the cooling water space. 5%, you have to choose the proper materials to handle it. It's you still can have some issues with it, but it was good to learn that early on.
And I don't think we mentioned this, but we're talking about the TTPC product.
That's right.
What are the recommended materials of construction for that?
Basically high density polyethylene, polypropylene, PVDM, some of your more high end plastics. Yeah, I mean, basically, the bottom line is avoid handling the concentrated material, avoid PVC.
And we learned that through that story I just shared. So, and I just got right into that story. I want the Scaling Up Nation to know that we have a history together. But before we get into our main interview, would you mind introducing yourself to the Scaling Up Nation?
Sure, my pleasure. So I'm Jeff Kramer. I'm currently the technical director at Radical Polymers, and I'm leading our new product development and tech service activities there. Been there about going on 2 years now. Prior to that, I spent 30 years with, most people remember, BWA Water Additives. It was a continuation of the Ciba-Geigy business, the Belclean, Belcor, Belicide type product range. So I spent 30 years there in the technical group, various roles from, research scientist to lab manager to, technical development manager, mostly focused around new product development and tech service for our Biocide product line. But for many years, I ran our US tech service lab. So got familiar with scale issues and corrosion issues, and our product lines, those product lines that would handle those issues. So
And you, of course, are a fellow Atlantean.
that's right. Been there now. Moved there in 1999. So live on the east side out in Snellville, Georgia. So yeah, I've got a kind of a hybrid role now here with Radical Polymers. I spend some time up in Chattanooga at our facility, and then work out of my home a few days a week.
And you, of course, work with a fan of the show. And of course, we are a fan of his, Mike Standish. He's been on the show, I want to say 5 or 6 times. Everybody loves it when Mike comes on.
Yeah, I work closely with Mike. Mike's amazing. He's got just so much knowledge about scale control. He's also a very good speaker, and has a lot of interesting experiences and anecdotes that he shares. So yeah, I'm sure he's a great guest to have on.
Mike has a story about everything when it comes to water treatment. He's always fun to have on the show, as you are. And I want to talk about what the main point of this interview is going to be. And it's the focus of biofilm and how do we determine the correct biocides? How do we know we selected the right biocides? How do we now maintain that we've got a good clean system? What are some of the metrics? So we're just going to talk around all of those things. So why don't we start with a very simplistic question, but this is going to be the foundation. What exactly is biofilm?
Yeah, so it's an accumulation of microorganisms on the surface, a solid surface, and they form a community as they attach to the surface, and they generate an external polymeric matrix which attaches them to the surface. So the way I mention it to people when I talk to people who've never heard the term biofilm, I say, have you ever been to a lake or a stream and you've picked up a stone out of the water and it kind of feels slimy? I say that's a biofilm. That's some microorganisms that in that body of water have attached to that surface and formed a community. I think it was back in the 80s that I think biofilms, they were kind of recognized as an issue. Some researchers did a lot of work and determined that in a body of water, most microorganisms are living on these surfaces. So it was a kind of a real revelation for environmental microbiology at the time. And Bill Costerton was one of the first people that promoted this idea that biofilms were a dominant form of microbial growth in the environment. And obviously, in our industry with using water and, lots of surfaces and cooling systems, we also can experience biofilms.
Is it safe to say that most likely in the systems we treat, we're going to find biofilm?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's a given.
So, knowing that, what are some of the issues that biofilm causes?
Yeah, well, I think there's three main issues that we as water treaters should be concerned with. One is there's some work out of the Center for Biofilm Engineering at Montana State, which indicated that biofilms are actually an order of magnitude more insulating than mineral scales, any type of mineral scale. So they're going to affect heat transfer. We're going to lose good heat transfer if biofilms form. I think the second issue is that biofilms, just because of their nature and the byproducts that they produce and the film that they form, can increase corrosion in systems, right? So as they metabolize, microorganisms are going to be making organic acids as waste products, and these are going to concentrate on the surfaces, close to the surface, and can increase corrosion rates. Patchiness of biofilms is also an issue, which can lead to corrosion. If you have bare spots, these are going to be, your cathodes, and beneath the biofilm, you're going to have your anodes, and, can create a corrosion cell. And then there's also a lot of evidence, a lot of scientific evidence that Legionella is harbored in biofilms, Legionella pneumophila. So it can be a reservoir for Legionella, which can, continuously recontaminate the bulk water where, when you take a sample of your bulk water for Legionella testing, well, you're only testing the water, but they also exist in the biofilms. So I think those are three issues, and I'm sure most people are aware of those, but those are some of the issues that biofilm cause in systems.
And let's say for our example today, we're working on a cooling system. When we are trying to figure out the right products to select, let's say we figured out scale and corrosion. Now we're looking at the right microbicide to administer in this system. What are some of the things we should ask? What are some of the things we should look for to make the best decision?
I think the primary thing is, you want to have an oxidizing biocide program as a foundation for your microbial control program. And it can be based on chlorine or it can be based on bromine, depending on how the system is operated. But maintaining a free halogen residual is important for control. And I think that it's kind of a moderating kind of tactic, let's say. I don't, typical levels of halogenation, you're not going to be able to, eliminate biofilm, but you're going to keep it in check, let's say. And then supplementing that treatment with an effective non-oxidizing biocide. You could select one has better activity against biofilm. There are some that work better versus biofilm than others. A lot of non-oxidizers will kill biofilm. I've studied quite a few non-oxidizers, looking how they kill and or remove. And there's some that kill but do not remove, and then there's some that will kill and remove biofilm. So understanding your options and selecting that latter type of product that's going to kill and remove biofilm, because your treatment's going to be able to get to the surface, and prevent corrosion and maintain good heat transfer.
So take us into the lab for a moment. You've studied biofilm. This biocide works better than that biocide. This biocide has an additional effect to it. How do you know those things? How do you set up those samples? How are you monitoring? Ultimately, that's how you get the labeled dosages. But take us into the world of the lab when it comes to biocide testing.
Yeah, it is several of orders of magnitude more difficult to test microorganisms against biofilm. And there's a couple of different ways to do this. And the bottom line is you need some kind of surface that you can do testing on. You could look at it a couple of different ways. You could look at heat transfer resistance. You could set up a pilot unit, let some biofilm grow, watch the heat transfer, resistance go up, and then you could treat that system and, hopefully see some reduction in the heat transfer resistance. That takes, quite a bit of equipment to do that. The other way to do it is to be able to have, again, sort of like a pilot system, and then have kind of a removable surface, like a coupon that you can remove from the system, because that's where the biofilm is growing on a surface. And then you can expose that coupon to some biocide treatment, different dosages, different contact time, and then you can remove that coupon and then assay the living organisms that are on that coupon. Similarly to doing a bulk water test, the way we do that in the lab is we place that coupon into a sonicator bath, run the sonicator bath. That removes all the organisms from the surface, and then you can test that liquid for the number of bacteria. And then you can back calculate the number of organisms per milliliter to the number of organisms per square centimeter on that coupon. So that's how you can check for viability. Have you reduced the viability in that biofilm? And then there's some techniques where you can actually visualize the biofilm on the surface of that coupon. So let's say you have two coupons that you remove from the system. You treat both of them with the biocide, and then one you sonicate, count the viable organisms remaining, and the other one you can stain and look at microscopically and look for remaining biofilm on that surface. So that's something that I've done in the past, and that's how you can determine if a biocide is just killing the organisms on the surface versus killing and or removing them from the surface. So it's a little labor intensive, and I think that's why a lot of pliers don't do that kind of testing. It takes a little extra effort, a little extra expertise.
So let's say we've picked out the right, as far as we're concerned, oxidizing biocide. We think we have the right non-oxidizing biocide. And now we look at the label, and there's a dosage range that has probably, a span of almost 1,000 parts per million. How do you know? Do you go on the low end? Do you go on the high end? And why is there such a range with biocides?
Well, I think suppliers realize that their products are going to see different situations in the field, and they want to have flexibility. Now, I will say that in the registration process of biocides, you give those ranges to the US EPA, and the US EPA looks at your toxicity data, and it looks at how you're going to apply the product and so forth. And they do deem that that range is safe to use, both environmentally and for people handling the product and so forth. So, having said that, my experience, especially with non-oxidizing biocides, is a higher ppm shock dose is probably going to be for some period of time is going to be more effective than like a low level dose that you might add more frequently. So let's say you add 20 ppm twice a week, so 40 ppm total per week. That's better than adding 8 ppm every day to make 40 ppm. So a high shock dose is going to be more effective than a low dose applied even more frequently.
Well, let's talk about the frequency and when to apply, because I've heard so many water treaters have an opinion on this. Oh, you got to feed it early in the morning. Oh, no, you got to feed it in the heat of the day. When should you be feeding non oxidizing biocides? Or does it matter?
I like to look at it as a overall program. So when you're feeding your oxidizer, is your non-oxidizer actually compatible with your oxidizing biocide? Can you apply them, simultaneously and get some kind of added benefit for it? Or if you do that, are you going to see some lack of performance from your program? I found that a lot of non-oxidizing biocides do have some type of halogen demand. Not all of them, but some of them. And so that, if you apply them while you have your halogenation going on or being used, you're going to see some interaction of the two, and you're going to lose some performance. So I think that's something that's, in my opinion, kind of not really well recognized in the industry, that can happen. There are some products that are very compatible and kind of boost the performance, or you get added performance of applying them together. So I didn't really answer your question about when to apply. I think it's uh, and you have to you have to get feedback from the system that you're treating. You may be treating during the day, it's not working. Well, try feeding at night. I know there's some benefit to that, but you need to understand, listen to the feedback you're getting from the system and then adjust your program appropriately.
Yeah, I love that answer. It's all about data. And if we don't have enough data to make a decision, well, we need to get more data. That's why this is a hard job. We got to make sure that we're getting enough data to make those decisions. Let's talk about surfactants. When should we use surfactants and what are surfactants doing into the biofilm and how do they interact with the microbicides?
Yeah, surfactants, they're amphipathic molecules, and you can include the quaternary, ammonium and phosphonium compounds as having surfactant type properties also. So you have a hydrophobic region and you have a hydrophilic region on different surfactants. And if you look at the microorganisms, they are going to have a cell membrane, right? And their cell membrane has a hydrophobic portion in the center of the membrane. So you have water outside the microorganism, water inside, but it's encapsulated by this membrane and has a hydrophobic center. So your surfactants and your quaternary compounds, they also have this hydrophobic region as part of the molecule. And that hydrophobic region really doesn't want to be in the water. So it tends to insert into the microbial membrane and helps disrupt the microbial membrane. And as it's doing that, it can allow your oxidizer to penetrate faster. It can allow your non-oxidizing biocide to, reach some of its target sites faster. So yeah, I'm a big fan of, using surfactants in combination with oxidizers and non-oxidizers, or using quaternary ammonium compounds to supplement your oxidizing biocide program. I've seen a lot of data, seen a lot of results in the lab that show that that kind of combination is very beneficial when it comes to speed of kill and also managing the amount of product that you have to use. You can use much lower levels if you can find these combinations that are going to be compatible together.
I remember when my dad was teaching me water treatment. He was very fond of quats. And I remember the first thing he told me was be careful because they could foam. Are there certain things that we need to look out with particular microbicides? Can you list a few?
Well, yes, there are a variety of quats, and there are non-foaming quats like the polyquats, and then there's your add back type quats are quite foamy, and that kind of limits their applicability to cooling towers. But then there's a few in between those range, of high foamers, no foamers that are kind of low foamers, and if you don't overdose them, they can be used quite effectively in cooling towers.
Before we dive deeper into our interview, we're going to take a quick break to hear from one of our sponsors. Hey there, Scaling Up Nation, it's Trace Blackmore, and today I want to talk about a powerful ally in the fight against biofilm, AMSA. Here's the bottom line. Biocides alone just aren't enough to control biofilm. That's why AMSA's R&D team designed BCP products to work alongside biocides to create an effective biofilm control program. Whether you're dealing with oxidizing or non-oxidizing biocides, AMSA products are compatible and enhance their performance, helping to keep your system under control. But that's not all. AMSA BCP products are versatile. They can be used for aggressive offline cleaning, gradual online cleaning, or as part of a regular water treatment program to keep your cooling water systems clean long term. Whether you're dosing in a slug-based or continuous program, AMSA has you covered. AMSA products are your secret weapon in systems prone to fouling, like those with high ammonia levels, hydrocarbon contamination, or reclaimed water. Because as we all know, AMSA's chemistry helps clean it up and keep it clean. Scaling Up Nation, if you're ready to take your biofilm control program to the next level, head over to scalinguph2o.com/AMSA to learn more about their innovative biofilm control program solutions. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/AMSA. Trust me, your cooling water systems will thank you. Let's jump back in right where we left off. So we started out our conversation talking about our experience when we were field trialing TTPC. I want to talk about TTPC because you've done a tremendous amount of work with that. You recently wrote a great paper for CTI on that. Can you tell us a little bit about what that paper was about?
Yeah, so that goes back to what we were discussing a little bit before about doing biofilm testing with biocides. So what we looked at there is we were looking at a number of different biocides, comparing them on their performance in killing biofilm and also removing. Part of the paper was looking at these different quats, different non-oxidizers. And then I also looked at the usual suspects of surfactants, surfactant type chemistries. Some of your EO, PO, copolymers, and some other surfactant type molecules. So everything being equal, the way we did the testing, the conclusion from that paper is that the TTPC product was one of the better performers at both killing the biofilm and also removing it. So yeah, that was an interesting paper, and I think it's pretty informative.
Jeff, back in 2006, when we were field trialing TTPC, really we weren't using PTSA at the time, but later when the product started becoming popular, we learned that there was an interference with that product and PTSA. What's going on with that?
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, Trace. So if you look at PTSA, right, pyrene tetrasulfonic acid, right? So it's a strongly acidic, strong negative product. And TTPC being a phosphonium quad, it carries a positive charge. So unfortunately, when you're running a PTSA program and you slug dose in the TTPC, you see a quenching of the fluorescence of the TTPC. So, the fluorescence signal disappears. The system thinks that it doesn't have any inhibitor in it, and the inhibitor pumps come on and so forth. So, it kind of defeats the purpose of having PTSA in the program. I believe there are some ways to get around that if you have controls, like a control system on your system, in order to say, well, don't worry about losing the PTSA feed or the fluorescence when you're dosing the biocides. So sort of lock out the inhibitor feed for a period of time while dosing the TTPC. So I think there are some kind of control workarounds for that, but yeah, we realized that was going to be limiting for the product. So we did understand that, and at the time we did develop some additional products, additional non-oxidizing products, which work as well as TTPC. So we launched a new biocide while I was at BWA Water Additives, which had activities similar to TTPC, but didn't have that negative interaction with the PTSA.
I'm curious, how did we learn that was what was going on? Was it just through customers of yours saying, hey, something's off here? What was the data that allowed you to know that there was an issue?
Yeah, that's exactly it. We got reports from the field. That was something we never thought about testing. We didn't anticipate that because I guess we had, success, and we saw, sales growth in the product. And then, as you said, then that was a little bit prior to PTSA becoming very popular. And once the two met each other, we did get reports back from the field that was an issue. A little surprising, I guess. That's a learning where you have to be, as a supplier, perhaps be on top of changes in the industry and understand how it can impact your products.
Well, that's been your entire career. You've been in the industrial water treatment space, figuring out, okay, how do we solve problems? And then occasionally a new problem comes up from that solution, but you've always been there to try to figure out what is the next step so we can resolve this.
Yeah, I'd have to say that that's one of the real satisfying parts of the job is, being faced with those kind of challenges and having the support to work on that problem, and come up with the solution. Yeah, it's been very, very satisfying.
Well, let's say we've chosen microbicides, we've got an oxidizer, we've got a non-oxidizer, we've got a surfactant on there. Everything appears to be working properly. How do we know? What should we be observing in our regular service? What should we be testing for?
I think visiting the system and checking the appearance, right? So obviously, algae is very visible. If you start to see algae forming, maybe your program isn't as effective as it should be. Check the basin, run your hand along the basin under the water line. Does it feel slimy? Obviously, routine checks of the bulk water, with dip slides is important to see if there are any changes over time. And if the system is more instrumented, perhaps you can monitor heat transfer, approach temperatures, keep an eye out on that to see if those are, still within acceptable ranges. So I think, just be familiar with the system and look for feedback.
We talked about foam earlier, and some biocides will foam. But also, when we're cleaning up a system, just the fact that we're cleaning up and releasing all those polysaccharides from what we're cleaning into the system, that's going to create foam. what is your recommendation on how we should handle foam? Customer calls, oh my goodness, we've got this foam coming out. Maybe we're cleaning up a dirty system. We told them to expect that, but now they're panicking. They want us to do something. Are we hurting the system because we're putting some sort of defoamer in? Should we put it in? Should we not put it in? What's your recommendation?
Yeah, I think using a defoamer, having that on hand, in order to treat excessive foaming is certainly a good idea. I know there's, several different types that are available.
Now, Jeff, I've always been told that you want to select a non-silicone defoamer because that could impede your heat transfer surfaces. Is that a true statement?
I've heard that also. I haven't seen any, data to back that up, honestly. So,
Everybody's got an opinion in water treatment.
right. I've seen people use silicone defoamers and, not have issues. And then there are, folks who say they would never use a silicone defoamer because they've had like a bad experience with it. So I have to honestly say it's not one of my areas of expertise. So I'm probably not a good person to give an opinion on that subject.
So your advice is a customer's complaining, you need to take care of that customer complaint. But hopefully, once we get that system cleaned, we're not going to have that foaming issue anymore.
Absolutely.
So that being said, I've always heard, and Jim Lukanich is the one that taught me this, he would say it's so much easier to keep a clean system clean than it is to clean up a dirty system. Now, we might be cleaning up a dirty system. It wasn't our fault. We just got the account. So we're cleaning up the system. We've got the right biocides. But then there's some times where the right biocides aren't the right biocides anymore. What are some of those signs? What should we be looking for?
Well, I can share like one experience where I think the wrong biocide was used, or maybe not the best choice. It was kind of a server building, like a data center. And you probably know and that data centers usually have a very large system volume, right, for the cooling tower that's actually there, right? Orders of magnitude more water than they really need for the amount of cooling, and that's I guess a backup in case they lose cooling somehow, right? You've got a big supply of water to keep the system cool. So those systems tend to have very long half-life. And the biocide that was being used there, the non-oxidizing biocide that was being used in that situation, it contained a lot of like co-solvent, not just biocide plus water. There was a lot of organic solvent in there. And this was building up in the system because of the low turnover. And they were seeing a lot of fouling inside the cooling tower. Well, that co-solvent was probably acting as a food supply for the microorganisms. So we were working with that particular service company. We suggested trying a different biocide. The biocide that we moved to, it was a very stable type of reaction. It didn't deplete over time, so you didn't have to add quite as much of it as the previous biocide, which was more reactive. So kind of, if you were monitoring, you saw it go away, but the solvent was building up. And, after a period of time, a couple of weeks, we were able to remove that fouling that they saw when we switched biocides. So I guess, the point of that story, and I think it sort of answers your question, is that you have to understand the composition of your biocide, what's in your biocide that you're applying, and make sure that that's appropriate for the system that you're treating.
Jeff, how important is residence time in a system? And do you mind explaining what that term is?
Sure. So, obviously cooling systems, evaporating water, makeup water comes in, and, you have a contained volume. And there's a dynamic situation there where the water will turn over some length of time. So you have a residence time. So various systems will have a different turnover rate. And it could be, some systems can be on the order of hours, some can be on the order of days. depending on, system volume, size, and that can affect, biocide selection in that if you have a short residence time, you want to make sure you're using a biocide that gives you relatively quick kill, right? So on the order of, an hour or 2 or 3 hours, right? You can see significant reduction of your microbial population when you apply that biocide. Now, if your biocide is slow acting and needs, 6, 10, 12 hours to get a significant amount of kill, well, that may not be, the best biocide to use in a system that has a short residence time. And I think that kind of information is typically available from biocide suppliers and manufacturers. They will provide a kind of rate of kill for various biocides. So that can be something that you can request that kind of information from your biocide supplier and then, better select a product for your different systems.
Since you are so involved in the development of microbicides for our industry, what can we expect in the future?
I think there's still room for innovation in the biocide space. And I'm a big fan of biocide blends. We published a paper several years ago at the National Association of Corrosion Engineers where we took several non-oxidizing biocides. I think we had 10 or 12, and we evaluated them against different microorganisms, different types of microorganisms, and looked at their effectiveness and the amount of product that was the amount of biocide that was required to get an effective kill against these different classes of organisms. And what kind of fell out of that study was that some of the more effective products, better performing products, were blends of two or more active ingredients. So that's been something that I've been involved developing, new blends for the water treatment industry. And we're actually working on one right now, an additional one or a new one at Radical Polymers.
Are there any microbicides in our product lines that maybe they've been there for years and we should consider taking them out of our line?
I think water treatment is kind of a Darwinian environment, right? So I think you see a lot of winners or popular biocides, and that's because they work. I've seen many promoted over time. Different actives promoted, and there's an introduction and a good selling story, but they kind of fade out over time. So I don't want to single out any product, but I think there are some that are winners and some that are, don't want to say losers, but they're not as popular.
How often are carbamates used in cooling systems these days?
I don't see them used much at all.
They were really popular when I started in the business, and I remember that rotten egg smell.
Yeah.
But you're right, I just haven't seen them used very often.
I think the issue with the carbamates is that they weren't as effective in alkaline water treatment. So maybe years ago or in the past, systems weren't running, at pH 8.5 to 9 as much as they are now, and carbamates could be used or could be effective. So yeah, that's a good point. That's one that you don't see much of, at all anymore.
Now, obviously, we have to have a relationship with the supplier to purchase these products. What are some of the things, because it's not just about the product itself, it's about the person that's helping us understand the product and guiding us through the use of the product. What are some things that we should be asking our suppliers to make sure we're with the right supplier?
Well, I don't know if it's so much questions to ask as can you get support from a supplier if you have a question? There's been a lot of consolidation in the biocide industry. So you have, less players, bigger multinational companies that are own and supply the biocides now, and they may not be as responsive as other entities. So I think hopefully you can find a supplier that gives good technical support and can answer your questions when you have them, or if you're starting a new system, you can get recommendations from them. So I think it's comes down to how much support that the supplier can provide.
They need to be a partner.
Yeah, absolutely.
We talked about your CTI paper. With your permission, I'd like to put that on the show notes page if anybody wants to read along what we're talking about.
Sure, absolutely.
Excellent. Jeff, this has been great. Biocides and microbes, those are just the most difficult part of being a water treater. They don't play by the rules. They're changing how they're going to react to the whatever the treatment is that we're putting at them. So thank you for coming on the Scaling Up podcast and sharing a little bit of your knowledge. Before I say goodbye, though, I do have some lightning round questions for you, but I have to make sure that you're buckled up and you are ready for them.
All right, I'm ready. Bring it on.
All right, lightning round question number one. If you could go back in time and talk to your former self on your very first day as a microbiologist, what advice would you give yourself?
I would say don't be afraid to ask for help because you don't know everything. As a new hire, as a microbiologist, you feel like you have to know everything. But I would say be brave and ask for help when you need it.
When it comes to learning more about what we're talking about today, what are some of your favorite resources?
I like going back to my old microbiology textbook every once in a while to refresh my memory about different organisms and what type of metabolism they might have, and understand how they're going to function in the field.
When Hollywood makes a movie about your life, who do you want playing you?
John Malkovich.
That was quick.
Yeah, and it's more for physical appearance than any personality trait, let's say.
All right. All right. Final question. You now have the ability to go back in time and speak with anybody you want throughout history. Who would that be and why?
I'd like to talk to Leonardo da Vinci because I think he was kind of a visionary and an innovator, and obviously super creative. And I think where he gets his inspiration from, learning that could be helpful.
Well, I will say that this industry is better because of the innovations that you have made in it with microbicides. And so thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today. And thanks for being a guest on the Scaling Up H2O podcast.
Well, thank you very much, Trace. It's been my pleasure to chat with you, and I hope we can do it again.
Well, Jeff, thanks for being a great resource throughout my career, and thank you again for sharing your knowledge with the Scaling Up Nation. I think we all learned a lot about biofilms and, the three big problems that we started talking about at the beginning of the episode, and then we really underscored during the interview. They cause loss of heat transfer, increased corrosion, and they serve as a reservoir for Legionella to be released into the bulk water. We talked all about different biocides. I hope that you are now more comfortable about TTPC and what that actually stands for. And of course, that's tributyl tetradecaphosphonium chloride. That just rolls off the tongue. Well, that's why we call it TTPC. And Jeff really was the pioneer in cooling water when it comes to TTPC. So maybe that's in your product line and you weren't sure how it was used and if you needed to use it. Maybe you were considering putting that into your product line. Well, now you know. You also know some of the issues that I had when we were field trialing it for Jeff, where we totally destroyed a PVC pump. And now we need to make sure that we use higher density plastics. Make sure whenever you are putting any product into a pump that you are checking your materials selection properly. Now, there are guides that every pump manufacturer has, And a lot of people, they just get used to ordering their favorite pump. Well, folks, you could be doing a better job, and that pump could last longer if you are getting the right materials of construction. So I hope that today's episode has helped you with all of that. Like I said, if you enjoyed today's episode about biofilms and you want to dive even deeper, revisit episode 253, where we talk to the person that runs Montana State Center for Biofilm Engineering. Of course, we've done lots of things around biofilm on this podcast. We've had several detective H2Os about biofilm. Episode 443 contained the Detective H2O, the case of the unwanted foam party. That was one I got the pleasure of writing. That was a very real experience that I had from things not being fed properly and biofilm being amuck. And then there was 445, another Detective H2O, the case of knowing it all. And both of those echo the themes that we talked about today, including something about TTPC. We talked about how that can interfere with the PTSA and how that signals. Now, we had so many resources for you today. All of those are going to be on our show notes page. Now, I know you thought that I missed it, but I still have some events to tell you about, and here they are. The 2026 Water Quality Association Convention and Expo is taking place April 28th through 30th in Miami Beach, Florida. Lots of water treatment professionals go to the WQA. Maybe that is you. Maybe you haven't heard of the WQA. Well, we can fix that. Go to scalinguph2o.com, go over to our events page, and we're going to have everything that you need to make a decision about going to that conference. And while you're there, check out the 2026 BOMA International Conference and Expo. That's taking place in Long Beach, California, June 27th through 30th. And if you are involved in commercial real estate, this is an event that you want to go to. And this is a really large expo. There are so many people there. It's really well done. And we're going to have so much information for you by going to our events page for you to find out all of that information. And finally, the 2026 Collection Systems and Stormwater Conference, taking place July 7th through 11th, put on by the Water Environment Federation in partnership with the Water Environment Association of Texas. This is all about collection systems and stormwaters, as the name suggests. And it provides a platform for professionals to share knowledge and network. We're going to have that information for you on our events page. Nation, we try to make it easy for you to figure out all of the events around our industry so you can decide where you're going to go to learn and network. Simply go to scalinguph2o.com, go over to our events section, and there is a treasure trove of every event that we know about. Now, if you don't find something there that you think you should find there, go ahead over to our show ideas page and let us know what that is, and we will be sure to get that event on our calendar. I know how hard it is to drive from account to account and do your best job as an industrial water treater, so I want to make finding your next event easy. Now, somebody that wants to make learning easy and fun is our friend James McDonald, and here is a brand new Words of Water with James.
Hello and welcome to Words of Water with James, the industrial water game show where I give you the definition and you get to guess the word or phrase being defined. Will you rise to the top or get blown down to try your luck another day? There's only one way to find out on Words of Water with James. Today's definition refers to the exact chemical amount required for a reaction to proceed to completion with no excess of any reactant. It describes the quantitative relationships between reactants and products. Can you guess the word or phrase? The answer is stoichiometric. Okay, for those who got it correct, step to the right. For those who got it wrong, please step to the left. Sometimes I almost feel guilty. Almost. I'm James McDonald, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Words of Water with James.
Well, thank you, James, and thank you, Scaling Up Nation. We'll, of course, have a brand new show for you next Friday. Until then, take care, folks. Join the Rising Tide Mastermind. Discover a community where passionate professionals come together to support each other's growth. Be part of a tribe that celebrates your wins and helps you overcome challenges. Don't navigate your journey alone. Find your community with us, the Rising Tide Mastermind. To find out more about the Rising Tide Mastermind, go to scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Find out if the Rising Tide Mastermind is right for you.